Hey, everybody. I am here with Michael Fisher from Codify, who is about to explore with me the inner workings and all the detail of this foreign substance rule being enforced now and what's going to happen in Major League Baseball now that pitchers can't use sticky stuff. What is up, Mr. Fisher?
This would have been a great thing to worry about in the off season, man. But here we are. Uh, all the spin rates are dropping like rocks. All my pitchers are calling me saying, I use a little, I use a lot. Does it matter? What should I do? What's everybody else going to do? And here we are today where they're going to start enforcing, and we're going to find out if, how serious it is. And then everybody's going to react to that or not.
So my theory is, and I think it's true, is that all the pitchers tangentially, I guess, outside, once they put down the memo, everybody said, okay, we're going to stop. Like it's a gentleman's agreement among pitchers. And I think that's why you've seen spin rates drop over the last 10 days or so. Is that what number one, is that what you're seeing?
I think that's really close. I think the guys that are using the heavier stuff need to know what they're going to do when they're naked. In the off season, they're going to count up the numbers. So maybe they're not all in a big hurry to do it out in games yet. Some guys, I'm convinced, are waiting until the last minute. So I don't think we've seen the bottom of what the spin rates are going to look like, even though a lot of people do. I don't think so. I think we're going to see a little bit more today if there's an ejection, let's just say. I think we're going to see some people pitching tonight go, yeah, better not put that little bit that I was going to try to get away with out there.
So one of those things, like obviously historically, pitchers have always used stuff. Like, let's not pretend that this didn't exist absolutely. Like pitchers, yep. I mean, number one, they're spitballs, but number two, Vaseline balls. People say everything, right. Everything to get an edge. And traditionally that's been considered like gamesmanship, like it's cheating. What is it? I mean, it's almost accepted cheating. Nolan Ryan said it's kind of like a gray area. And honestly, so I wanted to touch on this real quick and then we'll get into the numbers. And by gray area, there are a couple of things. Like one, all the rules in the MLB rule book talk about putting something on the ball, not something on your hand. Even rosin is illegal if you put it on the ball versus your hand. This stuff, people aren't just sitting there taking the ball and they're putting it on their hand for a grip. So the rule book knows how to make that exception. Historically, it's been interpreted a certain way by lack of enforcement, by all pitchers doing it, 70%, let's say.
Right.
So to act like MLB isn't complicit in it, or that it isn't even like, maybe this isn't what the rule was intended to get to. It was intended to get to unpredictable movement versus predictable movement, and more predictable movement by enhancing grip. That was my
The rule book said stop at stop signs. Stop. Come to a complete stop. People roll stop signs. You know what? That's okay. We're going to deal. That's okay. But now some people are blowing through stop signs and they're getting to the money bag first. And now we have a problem.
Great point. So obviously pitchers do it for multiple reasons. One is competitiveness. Right. You don't get to this level without being competitive. So you're going to do everything you can. If you see the next guy doing something and it's not going to hurt you physically, you're probably going to do it. Just like speeding. If you see everybody speeding and no cops around, what are you going to do?
You have to feed your family. And if you don't, you might be sent down.
Exactly.
Because 70% of the people are doing it. And so, I mean, I've talked to some people who are saints and they're like, I have to. My wife and kid, I'm going to be out of baseball. They're looking at my spin rate and I'm telling them, hey, I can put this stuff on the ball that sticks the ball to my fingers and get another 100. They're like, well, do what you got to do.
Absolutely. So, I think that's part of it is aren't you, it's almost like a moral imperative to do what you can to feed your family.
Right. It's true. I totally agree.
Yeah. The other thing that I think people lose in this discussion, they're like, well, now they're using ultra sticky stuff. There's a point where something is too sticky for the ball to even get off your hand, right?
Right. And then you lose command of the pitch, right?
Yeah.
You saw the demos where the guy's putting a whole bunch on and it's sticking. He's like, this might be a little more than they use. I'm like, yeah, it is. You can't see the web out there on the mound. They're not using that much.
Yeah. Like if you see the web, like we didn't invent new sticky, like this ultra sticky stuff, because if you put super glue on a baseball and put it on your hand, the ball's not going to go anywhere. It's going to go straight into the ground if it comes off your hand, and it's going to hurt. So it's not like we're talking about ridiculous, like it may be optimized, but it's not like this unique brand of sticky stuff that is ultra sticky that's never been seen before.
Right. Right. There's a limit. There's a functional limit.
Exactly. Great way to put it.
Right. I mean, you can get 4,000, but how would you, right? It's not going to go anywhere near the plate if you can even get it off your finger, and it's not functional.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So what have you seen so far? You've been running the numbers. What are you seeing in terms of when pitchers stop using it? What's about the drop that you're seeing per pitcher?
There's bands of guys. There's some guys that I don't want to rattle off names, but you can tell that they were doing something pretty significant and they've stopped. And there's other guys that you're looking at spin rates going, yeah, I don't know how they're throwing it with that kind of spin. I don't think they've stopped yet. Then there's all the rosin sunscreen guys that are kind of experimenting with, this is foreign to me. I've been doing this for years. I mean, these guys are going to go out there today, no matter what they do to enforce, and just out of habit, just be tacking up, oh crap, I'm not supposed to do that. And it's going to happen. Right? You have your ticks when you pitch, right?
Absolutely. Hats, people do that.
The hat thing is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the hat move when they let go of it and stuff.
Right. I mean, people are going to do that. And rosin itself has a little bit of stickiness if you get sweat on it. I mean,
get something on it. Right.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, when we're talking about foreign substances, to me, neither sunscreen you're allowed to have, rosin you're allowed to have. Are either of those foreign means something that is not usual to the game? You're allowed to have that in your possession. You're not necessarily putting on the ball. I can argue the rules. I'm a lawyer. That's what I do. But I do think that this is less black and white than people kind of make it. Like, these guys are cheating. They're evil. They're like steroid users.
Right. And there's the enforcement issue. How do you, let's say we were okay with rosin and sunscreen. Like, how do you effectively, in a time-sensitive manner, enforce that, but not the tax stuff? You don't. Yeah, so I think that's where they've gotten is like, well, we have to just say we're shutting it down, and then we'll just see what happens.
So let's use an example. And I think Bauer's been pretty open, and so is Cole. I mean, like, these guys are like, Bauer said, I don't use pine tar, and he doesn't use pine tar. He's using something that is the best mix of whatever he can do, because that's what he does. Like,
he told everybody, he said, if you're not, what do you want me to do?
Right.
You guys should shut this down. He said it for 2 years or whatever. And then he's like, okay, well, if you're not going to do anything about it.
He was right. Exactly. Literally was saying for years, I can't, like, I'm at a disadvantage because I'm a rule follower. Right. If you're not going to enforce it, that's cool. Let's not enforce it.
And he's smart enough to know how he would use it if he did. And that's what he's doing. Or did.
Right. So how much has he dropped about in spin rate?
When you asked me to look at Bauer units, he was at the top of the list. It's pretty funny. Not picking on him. No. I'm sure you see him throw more sinkers now, more changeups last game. How much does that have to do with it? I don't know. You know him. I don't know him. I'm sure it has something to do with it.
Absolutely. So these are the adjustments. Pitchers aren't just going to all of a sudden start stinking because they don't have it. They're going to change their attack plan.
Right. Look at Cole. Come on. I wasn't picking on Cole, and the guy still can reach back and throw 100. It's still going to be tough. But these guys that go down the dick at 95, they get away with it because they have 20 inches of vertical or whatever. And now it's 17 or 18, and a bat is less than 3 inches wide. And that's a bat. No, I'm not saying this guy's going to fall and guys are going to hit 400 and all that stuff. It's not. No, but mistakes are going to cost more, and we're not going to see it when we get really close up to it necessarily. But in the long run, you're going to see a tick. It's just like a chair. Do you sit in the chair you're sitting in? If you look at it with like an electron microscope or whatever, like, oh my God, there's all this space in between. No, but step back and you look at it and you're like, yeah, come on. This is just common sense. So the pitchers, to your point, will have to adjust to that. And I don't want to say any names, Liam, but when these guys fall in love, and he probably should, with with his fastball. He knows he can, like, if I miss, he knows where he can miss, and that's going to change. I've been working a ton on that to try to address how much does it matter. I need to know how much these guys are going to change, and then how do you look at their history? It's not the same thing, and I don't want to put it in this context, but when we talked about Trinan and how all of a sudden he's getting 4 times the horizontal, and no, he wasn't cheating and it's spinning less, and he changed his grip and the spin axis and all that stuff. But how do you run maps for Blake Trinan when you're looking at history and, like, that's not Trinan? He still throws the same sinker, but now the slider's going 4 times more this way. Maybe I shouldn't look at his history the same way. And that's what we've been working on, because these guys are going to open up their team intel, the spider tackers. There's not a lot of them. And they're going to look at their report and go, looks the same. I told you I wasn't going to use that anymore. My spin's down 500 or 400 RPMs. And they're like, well, yeah, it's the same. I mean, we don't know how to change it. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Like, do you think teams are actually actively asking their pitchers, what did you use? How can we adjust our charts?
I think they're asking what they use. I'm not sure. I don't want to throw rocks. I don't know. But I haven't seen any sign of any team really nailing that aspect of the intel. It's tough. I mean, I'm sure there's smarter guys around, but that's a big challenge. I mean, I've been working a lot. This would have been, like I said, a great off-season thing. It's just like this year when they say we're changing the ball. How are you changing the ball? Well, we're just changing it. Probably won't go as far. It might be a little lighter. The seams might be bigger, but we don't know. I'm like, well, how the hell am I supposed to prepare for that? But at least I have the off season. I can set something up to watch the first couple games and make sure it's in. I don't know what's going to happen today.
I think it's fascinating because it's like a butterfly effect a little bit,
right.
where
Absolutely.
You have like one thing, it's affecting this pitch movement. Now, how does that affect how everything depends on each other? Right. It's a hard job for you.
Right. I mean, today, I was going to watch that first game anyway, because I think DeGrom's gone, right?
Yeah, you got to watch DeGrom.
So I was going to watch anyway, and I don't remember I haven't seen who he's facing, but doesn't matter. We get into that game and somebody gets chucked, right? Or 3 people get chucked. Okay, you talk about butterfly effect. I mean, what does that do to the rest of today and next week versus you see some guy doing the same stuff and they do nothing? I mean, to me, it just seems like there's going to be a big difference in those 2 scenarios.
Right.
And what's the value of cheating, or whatever you want to call this thing of using foreign substances? What's the value, the marginal value, if only half the people are now doing it, or a quarter? It's more valuable. So it's going to be more tempting, gentlemen's agreements aside, whatever is out there, it's going to be more tempting to guys to be like, man, I don't want that 6 inches of difference between my curveball and my fastball back. And now it really matters because 90% of the guys aren't doing it. So I think the temptation to do it is greater.
I think there is definitely a temptation, but I think the way that others in the industry now will come down on that player, if they know they're cheating, I think pitchers are self-enforcing. Yeah, they're going to be like, hey, wait a second. Now, we all agreed. And, it's just, it's a gentleman's agreement. Like before this was like, hey, we're not going to do it anymore. And that's why you saw the race. And obviously, I think you're right. Like, there are people that still take steroids despite steroids being illegal and not allowed.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, there is a whole band of guys that I've talked to that are like, hey, just let you know, I use nothing. I'm not saying I never tried it. I don't. And I couldn't be happier because
it means you don't have to do anything.
The playing field. Yeah. I don't have to adjust my competitors. I mean, these guys are wearing your jersey, and it sucks that the reality is they're your competitors, and they're coming back down to you. There's guys in the minor league. There's guys languishing in AAA that don't use this stuff. They're like, hey, maybe I have a shot now.
I think so. This is a great point, because as some pitchers come down, guys that were naturally getting higher spin go up, and batters, like hitters, chunk. So they're looking at what the average person's doing. If the average spin rate is now lower, all of a sudden you maybe end up being more successful with your higher spin rate stuff than even you were.
That's right. Yeah, it'll be super interesting to see what happens today. I mean, what are pitchers? How are they changing their pitch mix? We've already seen that. We talked about that, and it's just kind of all up in the air. I mean, some pitches, some guys. I've looked at the movement. and it doesn't look like it really stands out. But then you look at how the ball's spinning, and they don't have a lot of active spin. You're like, okay, well, that's why. But the guys with, that are putting most of their spin into the movement, of course, if it's spinning more slowly, of course, there's less movement. It's fascinating to see the teams. Some of the teams have shifted more than others. I think I saw the Giants gloating a little bit because they're like, yeah, we don't really do that. And we already have the lowest spin because we don't do it, but we're going to move the least amount from all this. And we're actually really looking forward to the postseason because everybody else is struggling with this thing and we're just playing baseball. We're just going out there business as usual. So
I think that's another really good point. I think the other thing, like even it's going to affect people in like fantasy baseball stuff. You chose your players based on X, Y, and Z. And now all of a sudden, like, do you go searching out for guys that are change up and sinker guys? I mean, what do you think you do?
Right. That's a good point. I've been banned from most of my fantasy baseball leagues because I should have sandbagged more. Yeah, that was a mistake. But yeah, I mean, you would have to project that. That's, I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm thinking more about like the trade deadline. Like we had this trade brewing and then we're like, yeah, we wanted to throw this guy in, but like, yeah, spin rate just dropped 200. And I don't really know what that means for the long haul. So the fantasy guys, which is bigger than I realize, you have to be doing the same thing. I had this guy ranked number 10 on my list, but the guys around him aren't changing much. And this guy's down 400 RPMs. I mean, you have to, I don't know. I don't know why you would think they would be as good. But it doesn't mean that they can't adjust and get back to where they were. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm just saying there's no way to me with the same pitch mix and the same attack plan, there's just no way in the long haul you could be as effective.
Right. I think you're going to see I mean, theory wise, like you would use sticky stuff a little less if you're a sinker baller or if you're a change up guy. Typically you want low spin rate splitter. You're probably not going to.
Yeah. Right. The changeup spin rates are dropping as much, I mean, RPM for RPM as the fastballs are because they don't have it on their hand. So it's actually helping their changeup, which is interesting. And the other thing we're seeing is the velocity. Some of these guys are seeing velocity upticks. A lot of people were saying, oh, the velocity must be down and that's why it's spinning less. No, the velocity is holding steady, or in some guys are increasing. The guy that had the really bad RPM drop and the really nasty movement switch, his velocity is up like 2 miles an hour. Is he doing it on purpose? I have no idea, but I bet you there's at least a subconscious shit. I can't get as much out of this pitch and I'm going to just try to do it anyway, which you won't.
And do you think it's that? So I agree with you. I think so. My first instinct was, yeah, they're trying to throw harder to make up for the lack of spin and the lack of hop that they're getting. Or could it be that actually sticky stuff maybe tiny bit reduces your velo?
That makes sense. I mean, right? Why does it spin more? It sticks more. So that makes sense. You talked about your guy that loaded up too much and it stuck to his hand. What did his velocity do?
Yeah, right, exactly. So
it makes sense. I agree with you. You exaggerate these points to try to understand how the little things matter. And if you exaggerate that point, you're totally right. I agree with you.
Yeah, it could be tenths of a mile an hour or whatever, but it's
right. These aren't big things. I mean, you look at batting average over years and years and years in baseball, how steady it's stood. I mean, we don't need a big change here to have a pretty significant change in the offensive numbers.
What have you seen? I know it's early, but what have you seen on like hit by pitches?
Well, yesterday was lower. I was about ready to like pump something out there. I definitely saw an increase looking at kind of that rolling window. I was curious because I was watching walks as well. And, a lot of people are like, hey, it probably will go up a little bit. If your pitch isn't moving as much, if you're trying to throw it to a spot in the zone and then letting it go out and it's not moving as much, then you're not missing the zone as much. So there's that influence. So the walks didn't do much, but I think there's a hit by pitch component that might melt away when they get used to the new grip. I don't know, but it might not.
Right. Yeah. See, that's what I don't know. I kind of agree with that. I know that they in part said, well, look, hit by pitches are going up, so it doesn't help command, but it could be hitters are a little bit closer to the plate. They're trying to, I mean, so now they may go up as pitchers reduce their command a tiny bit and hitters have not backed off from the plate.
Right. What is a hitter doing? What's a hitter thinking about all this? Right. And I've heard so many approaches because when I talk to the guys I work with, I'm like, what are the hitters thinking when they face you? Well, if we're taking all your pitches and kind of compressing the movement, even just a little bit, I hear a lot of hitters just go up there, guess, I'm just going to look for this pitch. Screw the other 3 pitches this guy, or 2 pitches this guy throws, or whatever. I'm looking for 1 pitch. Well, if it's a fastball and it's moving 2 inches less, that you're right. He might stand somewhere different, and he's wagging his tail more than he was before. So it's a fascinating
thing. This is why a lot of pitchers have complained, is that you do this in the middle of the season. We're trying to figure out every single component that this is going to affect. Hitters have the same problem though. Like hitters, they may have started to adjust to swing a little bit above the ball. Now they spent the entire off season, right?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And here we are, we're, you know, the temperatures are warming up, at least out here they are in California. And it's muddying the waters because we see some upticks in offense. We're like, oh, it's because it's summer. Well, it might be part of it, but how much of that is this? It just seems like this has to be contributing to some of it, but we've only played a few games and all that stuff. So it's pretty interesting.
So just to give people an idea, how much, so what have you seen in terms of movement? Like what is this, RPMs and movement? What is that kind of, how does it correlate? What does it do? What should fans be looking at as far as a drop in movement, just generally?
Very dependent on the guy and how the ball's spinning. If it's gyroing, who cares, right? The one guy.
Let's touch on that a little bit more. Gyro, just so everybody knows, gyro spin is bullet spin, and basically think of a bullet. No matter how fast it spins, it's going to go straight and go down.
Right. And then not picking. Kershaw's not the guy I'm talking about. Okay, but like a guy who is kind of a heavy, like pretty much 12-6, not totally curveball that's doing a lot of active spin downward, and a fastball that's pretty much the opposite. Well, if you change his spin rates, you're going to see a pretty close to what you might think of as a 1-to-1 impact on the movement. The other guy that I won't name that throws very similarly, that maybe was caught on a broadcast load.
I think I know who you're talking
about.
But
hey, no names.
Yeah.
He's got a 6-7 inch difference between how much his fastball's rising and his curveball's dropping, and that's huge.
So huge. Yeah, so that's
two baseball bats, right?
Right.
Plus.
Yeah. So fans are going to have to, like, some of it they may not see. So you're talking about 3 inches one way or another way. They may see the results being different. Right. They're probably not going to be able to pick up by eye the difference in some of these guys, but some of them
not most. Yeah. Not most, right? It'd be the more extreme guys. This guy, if you'd watch these guys for a while, you'd see it. You could see it, and you could even. I think I've watched him enough. I could see it in his mannerisms. It just seemed like he's been so much like a metronome in how he's thrown, and now it just kind of looks different. And it's got to be frustrating to have worked. I mean, how long have these guys been doing this?
Probably, like, to me, as soon as you start scouting spin rate, I'm doing everything I can to increase my spin rate. Right, like you're just going to do it.
Right. And so here we are, and you're throwing a ball, and like everything about it, like you've pitched for how long, Rob? And right. And you have your curveball, and this is the tunnel I need to throw it in to get it to this spot. And that's all different now. Yeah. I mean, if it's shifted by 2 or 3 inches, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. Like where you start it, where like you have to change on the fly, and you don't have enough bullpens or throwing sessions in between to make that adjustment.
Right.
So, and the other thing I just want to put out there, I don't know that, I mean, you probably saw it, the Tyler Glasnow thing where he said, look, I use sunscreen and rosin to basically get a grip on the ball, not to increase my spin rate's great as it is. But I think changing that in the middle of the season caused me to grip the ball harder and then put pressure on my elbow. And I would go to war with somebody saying that this is what caused it. I've looked at it further, and from what I'm seeing, hey, you can never make that guarantee that that's why it happened. It's not impossible that it happened.
No, I wouldn't guarantee it. And I'm not that guy. I'm not that expert at all, not even close, but just kind of common sense. If the ball's more slippery, are you holding onto it more tightly or less tightly? We know the answer. I always marvel at those slow motion pictures of these guys throwing, and like it's the elbows flapping around in the wind, and it looks like this is not a something that you would want a human being to do. And now they're doing it with more tension in their forearm that doesn't sound like if you're going to have 1,000 guys doing it, that's going to be a good thing.
Again, it's another butterfly effect.
In the middle of a season,
Right.
if you want to tell them like, okay, at the end of the season, that's it. Party's over. If we have a actual CBA, the next year we're going to do this, and you can have all this time to play and get your body kind of used to it. That's, they knew this was going on. They should have done this before.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were going to do it.
Yeah, I think like I've seen a rise on Twitter of people commenting, "Oh, that's just a spider tack. Oh, that's just a spider." Like and I think that a lot of this is buckling to fan pressure. I think
Right.
Once it became an open secret, like people have been doing this for forever. They've been using pine tar. The Braves, Leo Mazzoni said he carried pine tar and firm grip with him to help pitch movement. Right. Nolan Ryan said he used pine tar. He wasn't opposed to using pine tar because it would help his curveball, and it was a gray area. This has been going. Your favorite pitcher did something. Now, probably. Yeah. So, but people did like you. Like if I'm you and I'm the number and I can look at all the spin rates, you can optimize it now. Like before it was by eye and like, oh, this feels better. This doesn't feel better, whatever. Now you can take spin rates and calculate, oh, this is what this guy's using. This is what this guy's using. This, and if I use this, it's going to help me. Not only that, but front offices too. We touched on that, but front offices would pick up a guy that wasn't using anything. So let's use Gary Cole for an example, because I mean, I'm just picking on him because he's actually been a little vocal on this stuff. But if you saw he wasn't using anything and you knew you could increase a spin rate by 300 RPMs, you can then pick up a bargain on the free agent market and say, yeah, and then increase it.
Right. And what happens today if they don't enforce and there's still that question of whether or not there are returns versus they crack down today and now they know the new numbers, what we see in the next week are real. I mean, it's just like you said, butterfly, two totally different ways. And I just don't know which way it's going to go. I mean, maybe I'm overplaying it, but it just seems to me like pretty fundamental. Like they're either going to do what they said, and they're either going to watch for this stuff, and they're going to eject people and suspend them, and you can't replace them on the roster, and so the teams are freaking out, or they're not. And if they're not, then guys are going to. I know I totally agree with your point that the pitchers are going to give them some serious shit if they see a guy loading up and they're not, but there's still going to be something going on. So.
It's the feed your family type thing. Like you, I mean.
Right. And seriously, how many guys haven't shut it off until this morning? They said, I mean, I threw bullpens without it, naked. I know what it's going to do, but when they count up my numbers at the end of the year, I don't really want to throw away a start or two. I'd rather keep spinning this mother until Monday.
Yep. I think it's a difference though, between like, if I'm speeding and I know the town doesn't enforce speed limits, there's no cops, and they all said, hey, you know what? We're not really going to do that. Then you speed. If you see a cop out there and they say speed limits, strictly enforced, you've seen people get tickets there, or you're worried about, like, I think human nature tells you that probably people will take it more seriously.
Right. The sign says on Monday, we're going to start writing tickets if you roll the stop sign. So.
Right. And then pitchers before they want to see how it played a little bit. And maybe that's why you've seen that drop. Is that, I mean, I do. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Some guys haven't moved, and you see a 70 RPM drop across the league. I mean, obviously it's not everybody. And people have said, 3% doesn't matter. And like, no, 3% definitely matters. If you want to call it that way. I mean, if you want to, the ocean floor is 10,000 feet deep on average, and the sea level rises a foot, it matters. That's not the way to look at this.
Yeah, but think about it. Like, so the difference between a ball fouled straight back and a ball hit over the fence is not that much. So when we're talking about on the margins, that's what we're talking about.
Right. And even if you barreled up a ball, would you rather barrel up a ball spinning at 2,000 RPMs or 4,000?
Yeah.
I mean, think about how what if it's 10,000? I mean, if a ball's spinning like this or like this and it hits your bat, I mean, the more it spins, the more that influences how you hit it, even if you barrel it, right? Nobody really worries about all that stuff because that'll give you a headache real fast. But it's definitely a thing. And it's another one of those things that, like, here's another little influence to the whole equation that's gonna play out.
So what pitches do you think are the most influenced by the removal of spin rate of foreign substances?
Oh, well, Yeah, I mean, obviously the ones that have the more active spin, you'll see more of a movement difference, but
And you could look all this up on Baseball Savant, active spin,
right,
all stuff.
right. It's just it's more complicated. Just right, like you have a pitch like a a pure active spin fastball and a pure active spin curve, but you have a cutter and you have a changeup, and those aren't changing as much, but they're you know it's pretty complicated. In general, I would say the ones that where your spin is influencing movement of in general, those will matter more. But how much does your fastball changing influence the pitches that you have that aren't really changing, like a gyro-y slider? I mean, it's still influencing that pitch. So the effectiveness of that pitch.
Yep. And you may see guys like their sinkers and changeups. If they were loading up, if they had some sticky stuff on their hand from a four-seam fastball or curveball, there's residue that's still affecting the spin rate on those other pitches that should be low
Right.
spin rate pitches where that you
Right.
want drop. Maybe
Right.
that helps them.
Right. I saw enough in the changeups, them dropping 70 RPMs ago. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
So we're seeing less effective fastballs and more effective changeups from this for sure. Is that a permanent thing, or do, like you say, they chunk? Or do they fall down and now they're more used to hitting the slow? Don't know, because we don't know where they're going to end up. So
yeah, so
I wish it was cleaner, but that's the main feeling I have. Is like, this is chaos to me, that they're doing in the middle of the year. You don't know the injury effect. You don't know how much they're going to police it. All this stuff, just to me, it's pretty chaotic. Even if they do nothing.
Right. Well, look at this further, like your specific business. You're in the business of exactitude. You go in there, you're crunching numbers, you're comparing pitchers to other pitchers, you're telling pitchers how to attack different hitters based on what you're seeing. And now all of that is basically thrown to the wind, and you have to recalculate stuff. So pitchers have to then go back and get new reports. You have to know what they were using to make adjustments, if they were. Like, we're not accusing any of your clients. But it's tough in the middle of the year.
Right. I mean, we're doing these maps here behind me.
Yep.
And, those are 3-inch squares. And they're not just, hand drawn or, hey, I think you ought to throw it there. I mean, there's millions of calculations behind this. And it's like, okay, so like with Trinan.
Dog just came in.
Something fundamental has changed, and that's what we had to do with him as an example. When we looked at his new maps, we're like, how come my slider maps aren't different? That I'm throwing differently. All the rules have to look at these shifts and go, this is a real shift, and I'm going to treat you yesterday as a different person. Whereas before, it's like, what's the best if I'm going to pitch against you, and I have 100 pitches I've thrown against you? I mean, those are pretty golden. Let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's paste around it with other times you've faced other pitchers and all that. But now it's like, well, wait a second, Fisher's throwing differently now, like a lot differently. Like, I'm that guy that has 4 inches less rise on my fastball and 4 inches less drop on my curve. So maybe now I'm not looking at our 100 pitches as much.
Right. So, yeah. So this is where the science comes in. Mm-hmm. Which is why you pay somebody like you to crunch these numbers as opposed to just guessing. You could also have told basically what it would help somebody if they were going to use this. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Now we haven't had this driver of these changes, but there's been plenty of guys that maybe they just didn't feel good, and there was a day they weren't spinning it as much or whatever. There's in the millions of pitches we have and the thousands of outings, we've seen shifts in how guys, they're not necessarily as big, but you can see if you look closely enough and you're patient enough at how that influences where they should throw. And that's what we're doing here at Codify is, okay, well, I've talked to you, this 300 RPM thing is real. I can see these differences in movement, and I'm going to choose to use kind of an alternate method on you and speed up this process that would have happened otherwise. In a normal situation, when we see a guy shift and how he performs, we go, is that real? Doolittle, like when he was fighting his velocity, is 94, 94, 94, 94, 91. Okay, well, are you going to throw 91 next game? Because I need to know,
Right.
Because your maps look very different. So that's the same thing here is like, I need to know what you've been doing, what you're going to do. And then you need to tell me if you're going to end up going back to some sunscreen, because to give you the best chance out there, I need to be able to
So you're
do
like
the
the
right math.
priest or the counselor or the lawyer or whatever it is, like everything stays in these four wall, I got to help you. This is, there should be like
Yes.
a codified client privilege. Like if you ever get subpoenaed, that never.
Right. No, I can't divulge that.
Yeah, exactly. I like
That's
that.
right.
I like
That's
that.
right.
So the one other thing, and then I'll let you run. Seam shifted wake. Like we know
Mhm.
that this exists now. We've this. So any little change in spin axis, any little shift in seam
Right.
orientation could affect the way your pitch moves in ways that we're not even thinking about. And the ball's going to feel different. It's going to come off your fingers slightly different. How are you going to
Right.
get that same spin axis or seam orientation when things are different? Like that could be a whole nother thing.
Right. I don't remember Barton's machine, and if he experimented with, like, here's the same pitch, except I'm going to fiddle with velocity, or I'm going to fiddle with spin rate, or whatever. But just kind of common sense that if it's spinning less, it kind of has a different path to get there, and it's interacting differently with the seams at different points in space between you and the plate. It has to be different. Not my expertise. I wouldn't talk over Barton on that, but it just seems, I think you agree, it's got to be different. And so now what? If you're a guy, whether you called it seam shifted wake or not, that has been leveraging that, something just changed. And like you're throwing a sinker, then you're like, wow, if I do that, I can let go and spin it at 1 o'clock, and it runs like I spun it at 3 o'clock. Whatever you were doing to do that, minus the rosin and sunscreen thing, or whatever you're doing, is going to be a little different, and you got to find that again. And maybe it'll be easy, but
Right.
maybe it won't.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Maybe it won't, and maybe you'll throw some straight sinkers and you're screwed. So
yeah, like I'm thinking about it, any change in the ball, it's so minuscule. Like that's why
right.
pitchers that rely on seam shifted weight can vary. If they don't get the same orientation, it's going to affect the ball. Now you're dealing with less spin and a different feel of it coming off your hand. Who knows? Like,
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Can we just get the KBO ball? Is that?
Yeah, I'm totally like.
Can we please? I mean, I didn't like it at first. I'm like, you can't screw with the ball without knowing what it's going to do. But I mean, we have a nice little lab there, and we have, double AAA equivalent players that have, we see what it's done. I don't know. I mean, I don't like messing with the ball, obviously, but then you could say, okay, you can't put anything on it. There's no reason to put anything on it. The rosin bag's gone. Don't touch yourself.
Right.
You have a nice grippy ball that has a reasonable amount of tack on it. Let's play ball.
I think most pitchers would go for that. Like the whole reason is you've seen more and more pitchers come out saying this is like holding a cue ball. It's just MLB balls are different, and they've changed. And the other thing is when they came up with all these rules about foreign substances and stuff, they used to not throw the ball out of play every single pitch. Like you had balls that were scuffed up or had better grip because they were more used.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 2017 ball. Now that I really pay attention, this is a 19, and man, that 17 is tacky. It's tacky, and this one is slippery as hell. This is a cue ball.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't want to throw it. And then you're worrying about every time you get a new ball, like you said. I mean, you got to get it ready.
Right. I mean, that's the thing that I think fans don't necessarily realize is a lot of these rules were put in place so long ago where you used to do one ball a game. And then they start throwing a little bit, it gets a little discolored, whatever. We're going to, now it's every single time. So you're getting, and the mud that they put on it is supposed to help with the grip, but by the, whatever inning, the second inning, it's dried out and it actually makes it worse. It's sandy.
It does. Yeah. I mean, how many balls are they going through now per game?
It's ungodly. Like it's a ton. And you see it, any ball that hits the dirt is gone.
Right. I always laugh because I don't know if you ever pay attention, but to this aspect, I'm sure you do. But sometimes the ball will get put in play and returned to the pitcher, and they don't get it. And it's always fascinating to watch the pitcher and kind of look at it. And some of them will be like, "Yeah, I'm throwing this one." I remember the very first time Straley threw a cutter. He throws his cutter. And I'm like, "What the hell, dude? You got to tell me if you're going to add pitches." And he's like, "Let me tell you what happened. There was this little scuff on the ball, and I didn't scuff it. I'm not cheating. I mean, they gave me the ball, and I know what it's going to do if I throw it, and this is going to be fun. I know the ball's gone as soon as I throw it. And he doesn't throw a cutter, but it's the one pitch. If you go back and look at the one pitch he ever threw a fastball that had cut, and it was that one.
Yeah, and pitchers knew that. So pitchers throughout the years, they knew how to make the ball move based on the scuff on the ball.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the ball, once it gets, once it hits the dirt, it's a little rougher, and you got rid of some of that slickness. So it's better. And now pitchers, this is why they've gone this way, is they started experimenting because they wanted a better grip on the ball. Then they weaponized it, obviously. Like if I'm going to do it, if Trevor's going to do it, he's going to test it in labs and say, this is the exact right thing. Like you're just going to do that.
Right. It's funny that people think it has to be the pitcher that scuffs the ball too, right? Yeah. The catcher's covered with metal.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Oops, it hit my shin guard. Now
sorry about that. Throw it back, like, yeah, okay.
So as you're throwing it back, it just happens to, yeah, exactly.
All right. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Oops.
Right.
Well, this has been great. Like, well, do you have I'd love for you, anything else you want to add? I would love to hear.
I'm on. I'm on pins and needles, just watching that first game. I feel like I'm saying the sky's going to fall. I'm not. I'm just seeing that on the edges of where they could react today are two totally different endpoints to me. But maybe not. I'm thinking a lot about what you said about pitchers policing. I don't know how serious it is. I know there's the gloaters. They're like, thank God they're finally cracking down on these guys that cheat, because I don't. But bottom line is, I'm going to watch that game. You're going to be watching, and we're going to watch that first guy that does something fishy, and then we're going to see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
It might be the pitchers yelling at him. It might be the teams, because like you had 3 guys thrown out, and you have a 22-man roster for 10 days.
Right.
Holy moly.
So to me, I think it's going to be like, if it happens right now, I think it used to be you didn't want to call anybody on it because your pitcher was doing it too. So you're not going to do that. Now your pitchers aren't doing it. Like most people are not going to do it. Teams are it's going to be open season on if somebody is doing it, they're going to find you and they're probably going to call you on it.
Right. It's probably true. The other thing I'm watching closely is for Arsenal changes, and there are guys that survived with the, like we say, those down to dick pitches, and it's like they know real quick that 300 RPMs is not going to get the job done. So maybe I won't throw that 60% of the time. And we've already seen some shifts, and there's a lot of noise in that, obviously, but you see some shifts that have been like, yeah, that's because of the tack.
Without using names, have you counseled anybody to change their pitch mix?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would,
absolutely.
I would expect that.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been great. I'm looking forward to it too. I'm hoping no one gets thrown out. Like, I don't want to deal with that drama. I think everybody, like, to me, it was always about equal enforcement, and pitchers getting like, give them something, fix the ball, and then make it equal. And that's all anybody asks. I don't like cheating. It's in the rule book. If it's in the rule book, even if it's ambiguous, if they decide to send out a memo to enforce it,
there you go.
That's the rule. Yeah.
Right. Pine tar in the bats that goes up 26 inches or whatever. Like,
that's also
we're letting that go. Right, it is. It's like, but they're letting it go. If they put out a memo and say we're going to throw you out, and then then we have to dance.
So it's fraternizing with opposing players is in the rule book too.
Absolutely. I'm agreeing with you. I hope I see no ejections or suspensions, but I also hope that I see more of a drop in the league-wide spin rates, because I still think some guys are doing it. And if I don't see a drop, I'm going to think there's still guys that are under the new rules sheet.
Yeah, I think we're here, and there's probably a little tiny drop further. I don't think it's going to be massive from
not as much. No.
Yeah,
right. I agree.
I also think it's going to be interesting to see if it's below historical norms, because people historically have always used something. So if you're totally naked, it might be below what we're even expecting it to be.
Right. I've only looked back to 2018, because 2019, rabbit ball, so it's kind of silly. Yeah. But it's already below where it was in 2018. So.
Right. That doesn't surprise me. That's what I would expect.
No, it should be. If it wasn't, then you'd be even more convinced they were still loading up. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, dude, thanks for joining me. This has been great. I hope everybody got something out of this. I know I did. And it's going to be fascinating. This is cool stuff. It's science.